security of my country must inevitably be linked with the security of a free Europe. And we shall continue to insist that here in this most ancient section of the civilized world springs the force, the vigor, the strength, and the commitment which can provide freedom not only for this section of Europe, but also radiate around the globe.
For my generation, it was, where were you when President Kennedy got killed?
November 22nd, 1963, I was in the second grade. I was 7 years old, and I was in a Catholic school in New York.
I was a sixth grader at a school in North Carolina.
In 1963, I was in second grade, elementary school, 7 years old in Lafayette, Louisiana. What I remember about that day was we were all sitting at our desks, and all of a sudden the intercom came on. The principal was saying the president's been shot, President Kennedy has been shot. And his voice was so frantic. I don't remember the intercom ever even coming on until that day.
And I remember, of course, knowing who the president was, even though I was very, very young at the time. I knew who the president was. I knew about his family. He was kind of a hero to us because he was Catholic. I was in Catholic school. And he had a daughter who was close to my age, so that was pretty cool too.
Purely timing coincidence, but we were lowering the American flag that afternoon on Friday, November 22nd, 1963, when another guy in the school came running up and he said, "Did you guys hear? The president's been shot." And when I came in, the secretary, the school secretary, was sitting at her desk and she was crying. Tears were streaming down her cheek. So I ran back to my classroom. I burst in the door and said, "President Kennedy's been shot." And about that time, the principal came on with the announcement. And he told everybody, "Let's go to the buses, let's go home, go straight home when you get off the bus."
I got on the bus that afternoon, and the older kids were really quiet, just very, very quiet. And one of them said to me, "Do you understand what's happening?" And I said I knew the president had died, and I felt bad because it was Caroline's daddy. I mean, that's kind of my frame of reference at the time. I remember going home. My parents were both there. It was very quiet. We were watching TV, and I remember my dad cried, and that was the first time I ever saw him cry.
And I went home, and it was like a hush fell over our little part of the world. Everything went quiet. The radio and TV was all news. For the first time in history, the networks went all night, the TV networks, and there were only 3. It was quiet for months. And really, I think the thing that got us out of that was a few months later, there was this musical group from England, a band called the Beatles. And they came over, and all of a sudden people had something else to talk about.
I remember watching the funeral, and I remember we were out of school that day, and the mood in my house was very quiet, very somber, and you know, just a very sad day for the entire country. I also remember the salute that young John did to his father's coffin, and my mom had just had a baby. His name was John. He was born in September of 1963, and after that we started calling him John John. That was the president's son's nickname.
Just the week before, a weekly reader had come out and had President Kennedy on the cover. Somehow it had gotten balled up and thrown away at home. And I was so upset that my mother actually fished it out of the trash can and ironed it for me so I could still have it. Nothing was the same after that, it seemed like, because it was like something had been changed and we just couldn't figure out why.